Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Howdy, y'all. Welcome to our DCFG webinar today. Actually, for us, it's a rerun. It's the second webinar we're doing today. So we have a slight advantage over you guys. We did it once. Today is all about DCFG, our new product from the DQMH Consortium, the DQMH Configuration Toolkit, which we are shortly to release into the wild. We want to take the time today to let you already know about all the great new features that we implemented that are waiting for you. So let's talk first maybe about configuration itself and why configuration matters. I guess everybody will agree that in any non-trivial LabVIEW application, configuration becomes part of the system's architecture, right? It's not anymore. And systems grow, we add more and more modules, we add more test stations, we add more deployment variants. You know, the configuration data is directly affected in terms of reliability, right? Systems must start up correctly. They must start up consistently across machines. We need to manage versions and environments. That is not a trivial task as and when systems grow. Then we want maintainability from our configuration data. Centralized configuration, which reduces like the cognitive load for all the operators. And also it avoids like, knowledge that is baked somewhere, somehow deep into embedded block diagrams. That's surely a situation that we strive towards. Of course, we want scalability, right? When we add new features or stations, that should not require us to rewrite code as we go. That would truly be a downside. We don't want to duplicate code. We want to avoid that. And of course, for all the technicians and for the engineers that work with our software, with our applications, they need predictable and safe and validated entry points where they can go to and where they can change configuration without the risk of breaking everything that they're working on. So, I mean, this already leads up to challenges that we see when we're working with configuration data. I guess most teams encounter similar issues when configuration grows slowly and organically. You run into situations where configuration values end up buried in multiple modules. You have duplicate data that are constants and block diagrams, maybe type defs that are not in one place. You have INI reads in other places. And again, this causes duplication, it causes divergence, and there are risky edits basically when you can't track your changes anymore. Furthermore, like modules need more configuration. The code becomes probably a tangle of file reads. You have different formats potentially. You have type handling, maybe even have inconsistencies in error checks as applications slowly grow. And this can become more and more of a burden. Furthermore, again, configuration formats do evolve as and when you're growing your applications. And if you do not have explicit versioning, or at least some kind of migration logic, we all know that older configurations will silently break, and we have little control over that. Next thing that we're missing out sometimes due to lack of missing validation logic. Can be to edit, of course, that's true, but it also does allow users to enter invalid values, and without multi-project or multi-station deployments, where you need to apply variations of the same configuration across stations or even across locations. The manual duplication sooner or later will lead to drifts and to inconsistent behavior. Now, I guess I'm setting up the stage here very nicely for myself, because obviously all this leads to the fact that we would all benefit from a ready-made tool that can help us deal with all these challenges in configuration management, right? And this is exactly why we, as the DQMH Consortium, have been using silently internally, but now are also soon publishing On the slide, you can see a familiar look and feel, I want to say, a window that looks familiar. It's modeled closely after the LabVIEW options dialog. You have a list of things that you can configure on the left-hand side, and the majority of the screen, the right-hand side, shows a pane where you can put your configuration data for those configuration items. I guess maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not, but this is a DQMH module. So DCFG is built with and on top of DQMH. And DCFG, one of the many nice things is that it adds configuration support, not only singletons and clonables, by the way. You can also manage configuration data for non-DQMH libraries and even have configuration data on a project level. So, you're very flexible in how you can work and how you can leverage. The next thing that DCFG does is it ensures that modules initialize, register, and update their configuration data correctly. So they are baked into the application automatically via scripting, so that with making sure that everything is in place if and when you use the configuration toolkit. And then finally, obviously, as this is a DQMH module, it provides an API tester from the configuration editor, and it does add DCFG support to the existing DQMH API testers too. I guess these are all things that you as DQMH users come to expect from DQMH. But now with DCFG, you can even leverage that in your non-DQMH based applications too. So far, I guess you will see, well, yeah, of course, configuration toolkit, I get a nice UI, etc. I can do that. Let me talk about the four, what I think most important key features of DCFG. First off, customizable panes for being able to edit the editor aesthetics. That means that large UI are customizable. You can overload them with your own look and feel, starting from small things like colors and fonts to basically more advanced and more intricate ways to update the DCFG UI and to make it your own. Or but that's a great upside of this product. You can customize the look and feel. The second thing I want to talk about are views. Second key feature of DCFG. Views are different panes that you can load for your configuration data depending on which level of user is sitting in front of the application, who is operating the application. You can imagine that for operators, you might want to have a slightly different look and feel, less information, maybe less configurability than you would expose to an administrator or a support technician. So DCFG allows you to do just that and prepare those views in a ready-made way and load them depending on the user credentials. The third key feature that I think is worth highlighting are presets, which are combinations, ready-made combinations of configuration data that you can save to disk and then again select and load from disk depending on the scenario, depending on the user that is operating your system. You can think about configuration presets for different locations, maybe configuration presets for different test systems. So you can have those ready-made combinations of configuration data that are collected like all across over your application, and you can easily save them to disk via the UI or load them back. And then, of course, the fourth key feature I want to highlight is that we are shipping DCFG with the scripting tools that automate the integration of all of that functionality into modules, pretty much the same way that you know that from DQMH, the way that you use the DQMH framework to build your application. And I'm highlighting those four key features of DCFG to show that this is something that you get on top of what is easily made by yourself with little time. I think as soon as you look into customizing panes, into supporting different views and presets, even automating the creation of certain features into your application, these things comes at great cost in terms of time that they take to develop. So I guess by now, everybody's already sold on me and what I'm telling and is asking, well, where can I get this great product? Well, we got the information for you guys. The DCFG is now a reuse module that's living in VILib. So it used to be, for those of you who might have worked with it already, it used to be a template that you would use to create your own copy of the DCFG editor. Now it is a reuse module living in VILib. And that means that and you can use it in all your applications and like create it as a dependency without having to worry too much about when you're supplying your code to others, how can they work with your code? Because the DCFG is now freely available via VIPM as a free version with two tiny limitations. Limitation number one is that the main VI of the DCFG editor VI module is password protected. And the second small limitation is that there will be a small label shown in the bottom left-hand side of the screen that says that it is the free version of the DCFG toolkit. If that is not to your liking, if you cannot work with that, there is a commercial version available that will remove the password protection from the main VI of the DCFG module, and it will also remove the small label in the bottom left-hand side of the window that shows that it's a free version of DCFG. Now, you don't probably necessarily need access to the main VI to change things, to extend things, seeing as we made it customizable already. But it truly would help to understand how things are working and, potentially think about making your own changes if you choose to, if you want to. There's a small link on the slide in the bottom, dqmh.org/membership comparisons. If you're interested in which membership packages contain which features, go to the website and you can look it up very comfortably in a table. Yeah, I think, Matthias, it's time to shine now. I don't want to steal more of our time. Let's roll the demo and see what it looks like in real life.
So once you've installed DCFG using VI Package Manager, you're going to find these 4 packages that are installed. The DCFG example project, which is a project example that you can find in the help menu, find examples, and that showcases all the features of DCFG and really worth looking at. You have the DCFG Configuration Toolkit, which is the toolkit itself, which installs the required libraries in VILib and also installs the scripting tools that helps you to add DCFG to your application. And then you have 2 project templates that we'll have a look at later based on the continuous measurement and logging application, which is basically a refactor of the CMA project with DQMH, but using now DCFG instead of the settings editor DQMH module. So let's go into LabVIEW and create a new project, and we'll start by the CML project template with DCFG. So you can see what you get with DCFG. So this project template is really a very good starting point if you want to start a new application using DQMH and DCFG. You probably already know the CML project template with DQMH, which is an apples-to-apples comparison with the CML project template that ships with LabVIEW. And in this one, we've refactored the project using DCFG. So let's open the main and just run the application so you can see how it looks like now when you have DCFG Configuration Editor Toolkit in your application. So let's start. We have here the main UI of our application. You can calibrate your device, start an acquisition, stop the acquisition. Now when you click settings, you get the DCFG UI, which is a UI that contains on the left the list of all the possible configuration elements, and on the right contains the specific configuration elements per category. In this case, you can see that we have 4 different configuration elements. The project configuration, which contains a location name. Here it is set to Paris, but I could put Montreal and click apply, and you can see that it changed the title of my main UI. The acquisition settings, For example, if we change the calibration array and click apply, we can see that the device needs to be calibrated again. The logger config is the path where you can specify where to save your log files. And we also have a launcher config, which allows you to set that the next launch of this application should be in debug mode. So this is how it looks like. Of course, you have a restore default buttons, which will restore the defaults of the application, of the settings. And this is really what you get when you install DCFG out of the box. How does it work and how does it look like in the project? Remember, we have 4 different configuration elements. Here we can find the DCFG config class that has been created for the application level, the project level configuration. If we look in the UI, you're going to see the location name as we defined it. We also have the launcher support configuration. So that's a DCFG config class that has been added inside the library using the scripting tools. This is where we're going to find the next launch in debug mode. And then we've added DCFG to the acquisition module and the logger module. So this is the 4 places where we've added DCFG using the scripting tools. Let's see how it looks like now to add DCFG to your application. So instead of starting from the CML with DCFG project template, I'm going to start from the CML DQMH, the regular CML DQMH. So here we have created a brand new project from the template CML DQMH. Let's run it very quickly. So this is pretty much the same application. But if looking at settings, you get the settings editor. This is not DCFG. This is the old style settings editor, which is actually a DQMH module. As you can see, we have here an extra module that we didn't see in the previous project templates, which is the settings editor. And that's a regular DQMH, which explores the settings of the application. Now let's say we want to refactor this a little bit and add DCFG for our logger configuration. For our logger configuration, we basically want the log file path. So I'm going to the Tools menu, DQMH Consortium DCFG, and add DCFG support. As we discussed before, you can add DCFG to different levels of your application. It can be the project, any DQMH module, or any library. In this case, we want to add to the logger module. And I'm going to copy paste this. The configuration parameters for the logger module are going to be the log file base path. Here you can see something named configuration views. This is very useful if you want to have different type of views for your configuration. Let's say a default view and for the operator, for example, and an admin view where you would show more stuff that the operator doesn't necessarily have access to. Something you can do here. If I add an extra view called admin, it's going to create 2 different UIs. Two UIs that I can basically modify based on the different needs of the level of the view. Let's create a little icon for our class. I'm going to name this logger config. And the configuration item position is the position in the list of DCFG as you saw previously. This is something you can change later. No worry if you don't do it right now. So let's click OK. And now the scripting tools are in the play and are going to programmatically create everything we need to support DCFG in our logger module. Okay, so within a few steps, we are ready to continue. you can see that on the screen we still have the default configuration constant that is visible. That's something you should definitely set. So we can, for example, use the get system directories and place the log files into the user documents folder. CML, DQMH, and my log file. Here, a little bit of cleanup, and I can now remove this table, and we're ready to go with that. You can see the logger config class has been now added to my logger module. And if I open the API tester of my logger module, we also have, let's move this below, two elements that have been added, the show DCFG toolkit and the views dropdown, which allows directly to show DCFG from the API tester. Indeed, the API tester has been scripted to start the DCFG configuration editor toolkit module. Also stop it if it was not already launched. And in case you click the show DCFG toolkit, it's going to show the panel of DCFG. And if you change the view, it's going to call the change view request. Also, whenever DCFG broadcasts that the list of views have been updated, it's going to repopulate the dropdown. All this has been scripted for you. Let's look at these views now. If I open the logger config class and go into the UIs, you can see that now we have two different UI, the default and the admin. At the moment, they are exactly the same, but I'm just going to put a slight difference on the admin one, so you can see how it looks like in reality. Okay. Let's save this and close. Okay, so now let's start my logger module using the API tester to see how it looks like. And I start the module and click Show DCFG Toolkit. And you can see that our logger configuration is displayed here. Everything has been scripted for me. And if we look in the code how it looks like, let's open the main VI of the logger module. The logger module has been scripted to start DCFG because it depends on it. When we initialize the module, we also call the init config VI. When we exit the module, we call the destroy config. And when DCFG Toolkit had broadcasted that the configuration has been committed, we make sure that that it applies to this module. And then we call the configuration committed. That has been scripted too for you, and put the configuration inside the configuration cluster that has been added to your module data cluster here. So if I want to fully refactor this module now, I can remove this old log file base path, which basically belongs to the old implementation. And instead of calling the settings editor update application settings to get the initial configuration, I just use the configuration that comes from the init config VI that has been automatically added by DCFG scripting. And to finish the refactoring, when we log the data into file, not here, when we initialize the file, we can use directly the one from the configuration. Let's see what is missing. And we have a little merge error here that we can reduce. And that's it. Okay, and the last thing I'd like to show you here is the views. Remember, we created different views for our logger config. So let's go with the logger API tester, start the module, and show DCFG toolkit. So at the moment, we see the default view. But if I changed to the admin view, you can see that I'm now showing this UI admin where I've put my admin label. So this is how you can switch between different views with different type of access. And of course, if you wanted to show a password prompt when switching to the admin view, this is something that that you can definitely do. So here we show you how you can use DCFG to add DCFG to the DQMH module. This is very similar if you want to add it to a library or on the project level. You go to DQMH, DCFG, add DCFG support, and let's say we want to add our application config at the project level, where you will put our location name. You can also create an admin view or not. Creating an icon is always a very good idea. And you click OK. And it's going to create the default config VI for you, and the class has been added directly to your project. The only thing you need to do now to show this config, this application config in DCFG, in your configuration editor, it's to call the init config at some point to register this config, and of course call the destroy config to deregister it. Let's see how it looks like if we go back to our CML with DCFG project template that we created before. If I look at the main and go to the block diagram, you can see that we start DCFG right at the beginning of the application because we need the DCFG toolkit to register our application configuration and our various modules configuration. So the DCFG toolkit should always be one of the first things you start with your application. So then you can start registering configuration and handling configuration properly. Also, we'll see that a little bit later, but the first call to the DCFG start module is where you can customize DCFG2, such as changing the configuration folder where to store the configuration files. And the DCFG wrapper, we'll discuss that later, but you can also override this DCFG wrapper class to customize even more the behavior of DCFG and the look of DCFG. And here we are calling the init configuration for our application config with the location name. Then we're calling the init config for our launcher support config, which contains the next launch in debug mode. And when we close the application, we call the destroy config. And that's just with this that you can register application project level configuration with DCFG or library level configuration with DCFG. If we look a little bit at the code on how we did handle the location name, that's very straightforward. When we initialized our module, we are getting the current config. Get current config, that's a VI that ships when the class is scripted, the DCFG config class is scripted. You get the current config and you retrieve the location name. We are registering for DCFG broadcast events in this module. So when DCFG toolkit broadcasted that the configuration has been committed, if this is the application config that has been committed, we then retrieve the configuration and again update the front panel title. That's just an example of how to implement application project level configuration into your application. Now the last thing I would like to show you is how to even further customize DCFG. For this, we are going to create a new project template, but this time use the CML DQMH with custom DCFG. Okay, so we've created DCFG so you can really customize it to your needs, to your style, add your logo, your colors, your font. To do this, you can create a child class of the DCFG wrapper. If we look in VI lib, you're going to find the DCFG Toolkit library, and it contains the DCFG wrapper class and the save load class, and of course the configuration class. The configuration class is the one that we use when we create a new configuration for your module or for your project. It creates a child of that configuration class and everything is scripted for you. The DCFG wrapper class contains a lot of things that you can override. Pretty much everything can be overridden to allow you to customize the DCFG wrapper. Let's look at an example. Here we created a custom DCFG wrapper class, and we created custom UIs for the commit part, the title, the tree with our own colors and our own code that is going to set customized colors for our elements. DCFG is actually based on different subpanels. 5 subpanels, the commit, preset, restore, title, and tree subpanels that you can all customize. So if we look at the main, when we start DCFG at the very beginning of our application, instead of leaving the default DCFG wrapper class, we are putting our custom DCFG wrapper class. That custom DCFG wrapper class, we decided to put some color elements in it that we initialize here. And now if I start the application with the custom UI, you can see that we have a DCFG UI with completely different buttons and colors and style, which gives a lot of power for you to customize DCFG and add your own branding. Another thing that you can customize with DCFG, it's the presets. You can use the default DCFG wrapper class or your custom DCFG wrapper class, but just enable the presets. What are the presets? Let me restart the application, and now I will use the default with the presets and show DCFG. And you can see that here you have new buttons. It allows you to create and manage presets. Let's say I have a specific set of configuration where I want to save to Apples and Apples folder and save this as my Apple presets. And I have another one called oranges. And this time I save it as oranges. Yeah, I probably gave this demo already, so I already had this preset created. Just going to recreate it again. And now you can go to manage presets and see that you have different presets that you can delete, rename. But here at the moment, I have the oranges presets loaded. And of course, I can load the Apples one. And it changes directly all the configuration elements that are related to that preset. So that's an extremely useful feature. If, for example, you have different type of test stations with different type of hardware, but managed with the same configuration, but different settings, you can use the presets, and that's something that comes for free out of the box with DCFG Toolkit. Another example of customization, it's the save load. By default, DCFG saves the configuration into binary files by flattening basically the configuration cluster into a variant and saving that variant as binary data into a file. If you wanted to save your configuration in a database or into JSON files, this is something, of course, you can do by creating a child class of the save load. The save load is also available in the DCFG Toolkit library, and it has some methods that you can override: the file extension, load config, and save config. So in our child class, we overridden the file extension to be JSON. And when we load the configuration, we now load it from a text file instead of a binary file. And we are also saving the configuration into a text file. Now the configuration which is a variant here on the connector pane, but we don't expect it to be a variant. We expect it to be really a JSON file. So if we go look at the logger module and in file and save config, you can see that in the case of the custom save load, we are actually saving our configuration into JSON. And when we load the configuration in case of the custom save load, we are basically expecting a JSON string that we can unflatten and retrieve our log file base path. So this is another example of how you can customize DCFG using child classes. That's all for this demonstration today, and we hope that you liked it and that you got a nice overview of everything you can do with DCFG. And of course, feel free to ask any questions you have.
All right, thank you, Matthias, for that wonderful demo. If you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them in the chat. You can join the chat at the lower part of this video and then scroll up and you'll see the chat on your YouTube video if you're watching live. This morning, there was a question about when will the HSC template or if they could use DCFG with the HSC template. And Jörg informed us that as soon as DCFG becomes publicly available, HSC template will be one of the first public applications that will use it. All right. So where it gets complicated, one of the things that DCFG excels at is handling updates to your configuration from different parts, not just directly on the file or the editor or the DQMH module itself, but when you actually need the application to update the value. Every time I mention this, people have a little bit of problem understanding it. So the best example I can give you is you have two DQMH modules. One can determine the location of where you're geographically located, and the other DQMH module is an instrument that requires a filter setting depending on where you're located in the world, either 50 Hertz or 60 Hertz. You really don't want your instrument driver to depend on a third-party DQMH module that looks at the location. You want those two things to be separate. So being able to set the filter setting, not only directly through the DQMH module, but externally update that configuration would allow the location setting to notify the application when the location is updated, and then the application itself could update the setting. DCFG already manages this, and when you get to use DCFG, I recommend that you go check the API testers and try these so you can check it out for a good measure. Now, Matthias just showed you the CML. If you were familiar already with the DQMH CML, it was meant as a comparison apples to apples with the continuous measurement and logging sample project that ships with LabVIEW and is written using NIQMH. And we even modified recently the documentation to show that we really did not advocate that way of doing it, but we wanted to make sure that we were comparing just like they were using the settings, we did the settings. The problem with that is that that created lots of dependencies. And we mentioned there that we would like to do it with the configuration editor. So now that the configuration editor is going to be publicly available, we decided that this was a good opportunity for us to show you how we would do it with DCFG. So the two sample projects that come with DCFG is the CML with DCFG. That's the out-of-the-box vanilla version of DCFG. You don't have to know anything about classes. You don't have to do anything. It just works. And there's also the option of CML with customized DCFG that allows you to see the power and how far you can take the customizations from DCFG. All right, over to you, Jörg, on the offerings of the consortium.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. Yeah, now that you've heard all about the new and upcoming version 3 release of DCFG, I want to remind you that we also have a few other helpful tools in our toolbox. First of all, the Lumos toolkit, which probably all you guys remember, which you can use to monitor the communication inside your application live and in real time, meaning that you can track all the messages being sent in between your modules and like print them on screen in a nice flowchart or flow diagram. Then second off, we have the DTS framework. That's for implementing simple test sequences. We like to say that it serves as a lightweight alternative to test stand. One of the upsides being that it's fully compatible with LabVIEW real-time. So that's an upside. Then, of course, the pencil icon in the middle is the DCFG, which you've learned about. Then we have the vAnalyzer test suite, a collection of vAnalyzer tests that the DQMH consortium publishes. That goes hand in hand with the DQMH consortium style guide. That's the little book icon in the bottom right corner. Then on the top row, rightmost, the little heart icon is for donations. So if you feel that you want to support our cause, then feel free to go to our website. You'll find the donation in the web shop. And this is probably a good place, a point in time, to remind everybody that the DQMH Consortium is a not-for-profit organization. So all the profits that we make here with all of our endeavors, be it products, toolkits, trainings that we offer, etc., all that goes straight into maintaining the DQMH framework, first and foremost, and all these accompanying products. So with that being said, in the second row on the left-hand side, we see offerings for training. So of course, there's the official DQMH training course that we can give, that also our trusted advisors can give. And for our trusted advisors, we also share the training materials with them so they can give trainings. So I guess this is a nice segue to the DQMH membership programs. Very interesting for those of you interested in diving into the ecosystem of DQMH and doing more with that. We have two membership programs at the moment. We have the enthusiasts and we have the trusted advisors. The enthusiasts being a program that is meant for companies that are not outward facing, that do not do so much project work with third-party customers, but use DQMH internal for their own needs. Whereas the trusted advisors are meant as a first point of contact for customers who need help with DQMH. And therefore wanted to look into contacting our trusted advisors. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, you can go to the website at dqmh.org/memberships-comparison, and you will find a nicely formatted table. Kudos to Matthias for that one, where you have all the different facets and options for the memberships programs listed next to each other. Yeah, we do have some resources. We will share the slides afterwards with you guys so you can go to these places and learn more about DQMH, about the DQMH products, tool chains, etc. And I guess that leads me to the summary that too long didn't read. DCFG simplifies configuration for DQMH and beyond. And with that, we have reached the end of our webinar. If there are no more questions, let me thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join us today. And from all of us at the consortium, we wish you happy holidays, Merry Christmas, all the best for next year. And I do hope that we get to talk soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.